Lewis Orr was one of my first and one of my best ever in terms of playing, in terms of being just a great person. He set an example for all Syracuse Orangemen to follow, and we've had a lot of followers who've been a little bit like Lewis, none quite to the level as a human being as Lewis Orr was. We were lucky to have him to coach your first team and have Lewis Orr and Roosevelt Bowie and Hal Cohen on it. It was easy, it was fun, and it didn't prepare me for all the difficulties ahead with players. I just had it too easy with those guys, and Lewis Orr was the best of the best.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of the Big East Rewind. I'm your host, Chuck Everson, and my co-host, as always, is Sonny Sparrow of Syracuse University. And Sonny, today we talk about somebody that the basketball world, the Big East world, lost on December 14th at too young an age. At 64 years old, we lost Lewis Orr, a fellow Orangeman, a legendary player at Syracuse. And today, as we've done in the past, we've had some shows where we talked about Pearl and Coach Massimino. We're going to talk about Lewis Orr and honor his memory today on the Big East Rewind. So how are you, Sonny? How are you? Tell us your earliest memory of Lewis.
My earliest memory of Lewis was first of all, as a fellow thin man. Okay. I love the fact that Lewis was successful at his height and his weight. Number one, I was maybe closer to his weight than I thought, and he had me by 4 inches. And he just could do things, and he could do it inside, right? And I'm a point guard. I'm going to stay outside. I don't care. So I thought, okay, I got a shot at this. And he was so quiet and humble. You didn't get to know Lewis like right away. It took some time, right? So I didn't really become very close with Lewis early. Plus, he was also, playing in the NBA and everything like that. So it was at different moments that I was able to, spend a little time with him here and there, and then communicating with texts and over the years. And then, the Seton Hall job, and then he's close to, where my in-laws are and stuff like that. So it was, my first memory was, okay, here's this 55 dude. He's thin as a rail, but he's wiry and tough. And to me, he always seemed like, he was never injured, and like that was impressive for what he went up against and what he did, how he was able to do it, and just smooth as silk. And he had that baseline, that 15-footer. And my high school teammate, Sean Cairns, tried to emulate Lewis. And in fact, he changed his number his sophomore year to 55.
Right.
He was 45 when he started, and then he changed 55. He was, I'm gonna be Lewis. And I was like, well, go for it, man.
Well, we're gonna have a good discussion today, Sonny. We have a great panel of
my boys,
players
my
and
guys
coaches.
here, man.
We got the guys here. So let me introduce everybody. First, from Seton Hall University and the University of Cincinnati University, was Coach Mike Brown. Mike was an assistant at Cincinnati and recruited Lewis to go to Cincinnati. He's also assistant coach at Seton Hall. He was the associate head coach at Fordham, and now he's the executive director of the Black Rock Foundation, which helps inner city athletes improve their educational opportunities through faith, education, and basketball. How are you, Coach?
Hi, Chuck. How are you?
Welcome back. This is a two-time showing for Coach Brown.
I'm honored.
Right?
I'm
there
honored.
You go.
It's always a pleasure to reminisce with you guys and think about the Big East days. As time goes on, I think we all recognize how blessed we were to be part of that great conference and all those great moments. And I'm no different.
Also joining us today is Hal Cohen, who was a Syracuse player in the same class as Lewis and Roosevelt Bowie. And that crew over there at Syracuse had a successful career at SU. And, also, as we joked earlier, he's world renowned and famous for his foul shooting. So we're gonna talk about that as well too. So Hal, you just went through your normal routine and then just said, let me just see how many I could make before I missed? Is that how that went down?
Yes. Well, in high school, at the end of practice, the coaches would always say, shoot 25 free throws, go shower, and then go home, and
Yeah.
so I don't know if you guys are the same way, but when you make if you make your 25th shot, we always said, yeah, okay, now shoot till you miss now. So I made my 25th shot and I kept shooting. And an hour and a half later, I had made 598 in a row.
Jeez. Wow.
But at that time, we didn't have I don't know if you guys know about this thing called the internet. We didn't have that back then. So we had to go up to the library. That's a place where they have a lot of books. I don't know if you guys know about
That's
that.
also the name of a bar in Syracuse. Hal. Don't think I don't know. I played there.
That's in the Hotel Syracuse basement.
I would tell everybody I was in the library. Meanwhile, I was having, a few sodas with Sonny.
So we looked it up, and it said the world record was 499 by Bunny Levitt. And but it turned out some other guy had made 1,700 or something like that, Wow. So I guess I was in second place or something.
And
did you just get tired after 598? Did you just get tired?
I don't really. I just remember being, my calves were tight, my hand was tight, but I used to take 3 dribbles and then shoot. And then I got to that point where I was just like, okay, I'm just going to shoot it when they threw it back to me, And so I ended up doing that. And then my arm kind of, how it kind of gets stuck. And
wow.
So,
got to economize your energy. That's
you
all.
have to ice that shoulder down, Hal.
But I'll know. But the next game which was 2 days later, I got fouled going in for a layup, right in the first quarter. And my first 2 foul shots, I got all these signs in the gym, Cohen this, 598 that, and greatest person in the world. And that was my mother's sign. And I clang, I missed them both. So that's the difference between, we talked about that's the difference between practice and real life.
Of course. And well, welcome Hal to the show.
Thank you.
Coming on. And finally, last but certainly not least, Sonny, the original Shack is with us.
Original Shack, baby.
Shackleford, who is an outstanding player, played a long time in Europe, a 13-year pro career in Europe, Syracuse legend as well. Dale, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Sonny. Mike, it's good to see you. Hal, it's always a pleasure seeing you.
Nice seeing you.
Yeah. Finally people got it right, the original Shack.
Right.
A few years until that other guy with the Q retired before they realized that, really the original.
Yeah, and also I'm gonna give props to this too. Everybody thinks Patrick Ewing's the first guy to wear the T-shirt under the jersey. That's it. Dale Shackleford was the first guy that did it. My whole high school, when we had our practice gear, we were putting T-shirts on and we were all trying to be Shaq.
There you go.
So both of these guys I idolize. Now, I don't know if you know Hal. Hal's a doctor, right? So he had gone through the program at Syracuse. So when I wanted to go to dental school, I was like, I have a legitimate shot because Hal's already done this. Because it's hard. I mean, it's hard to get some of those classes in labs. And I could always say, listen, Hal did it, so I could do it, And then Shaq was just a hero of all of ours at Union Endicott. So,
yeah, that's great
Thank
stuff.
you, guys.
So, guys, let's just start out. I mean, when you were recruited, Hal, let's start with you. When you were recruited, how did that work as far as coming to SU and when you met Lewis and Roosevelt and the guys that came in your class? Did you guys know each other prior? Was it somebody when you met him when you first came on campus? How did that all shake out?
Yeah, that's interesting because back then there was no AAU, and so the big thing was to go to the camps, and the big orange camp. I came here my sophomore year, and going into my junior year, my junior year going into my senior year in the summer. So I met Rosie because Rosie came to the camp. Lou, I didn't know. But the interesting thing, so you don't really know about the players that we were coming in at that time. Now they have all sorts of video on everybody, So when I first met Lou, you're out at the Manley Fieldhouse and everybody's looking around to see who, and kind of looking at each other to see who's who and what's what. And my first thought was, man, Rosie's huge. And number two, I felt bad for Lou. Yeah, I didn't really know him. I'm looking over there and he's 6'8" and he's 160. I weighed more than Lou. And he had braces, I think he had some acne. And I thought, man, this guy's going to have a lot of trouble. Until we went out onto the court and I said, wow, this guy's pretty good. So that was our initial meeting, was at Manley Fieldhouse.
Yeah.
Now, Dale, you were what, a sophomore then when they came in?
Yeah, I was a sophomore, and fortunate for me, probably unfortunate for Lewis. We were roommates his freshman year, my sophomore year, and I go into the dorm because the year before that I had Billy Keith as a roommate, and I went into the dorm room on the 14th floor of Lawrenson.
Yeah.
There's this 6'8" skinny kid in the room there, and I'm looking like, who the heck is this guy? What's he gonna do? This is what they brought in to, fight me for my position. So it turned out, Lewis was a great competitor. He pushed me to the limits most times in practice. He was the type of person that, he was a quiet assassin. He was very quiet, didn't make a lot of noise, didn't talk trash to anybody. He was just there to get the job done. And, as the years went on, Roosevelt and I would say, okay, we got to make sure we box out because Lewis slip in and get the rebound. And, Lewis always was good, around the basket, getting rebounds. He was a little bit more physical than people thought he was.
Right. Yeah.
Hold his own down there, and he'd give you those sharp elbows, and the jump shot and running the floor. That was Lou's bread and butter.
Yeah. Coach, now you recruited Lewis. He grew up in Cincinnati, as we know, and you recruited him, right, for University of Cincinnati?
I did, Chuck. I forget what year. I guess Lewis probably was a senior in 76,
Yes.
77. So his junior year, he would come over and play with our guys at the old field house on the Cincinnati campus. And, we followed up with a recruiting process because he was a local kid and the best player in the city. But we were loaded then. Pat Cummings wasn't even our best player. He was the one who went on post-college and had the most notoriety playing with the Bucks and the Knicks and the Mavericks. But we had some other really good college players to the point where we were ranked, second, third, fourth in the country there for a good part of the season. And then eventually in March, lost to Marquette, who went on to win the national championship. So consequently, when it came down to if we were going to offer Lewis a scholarship, Coach Gail Catlett, who was the head coach at the time, decided that it probably wasn't a good idea to offer a local kid a scholarship if he wasn't going to have an opportunity to play for us, which, as it turned out, was the best thing for Lewis because he would have sat for us for at least 2 years till he was a junior. And, whereas he went to Syracuse, and if I'm not mistaken, he started right away, which was was best for his development as a player. So that was the story about, Lewis and University of Cincinnati and us recruiting him. Great kid, got to know him, got to know Lindsay, his brother. And he started hanging out with our players during the summer, that summer between his junior and senior year. And, I was really kind of disappointed that we didn't offer him because he was, part of the family, basically. But as I said, in the end, it turned out best for him that we didn't, because Syracuse was the better situation for him.
So tell us about what kind of player was he in high school, Mike? I mean, when you're looking at a kid, any kid, not just Lewis, but tell us what type of player was he back then? And how did his, we saw him when he was with the Knicks. We saw him a little bit at Syracuse. How did his game evolve from the high school game to where he wound up being, when he made the NBA level?
Well, yeah, a good question, Chuck. Obviously at 6'8", playing on the high school level, he had to play in the post with his back to the basket. And so, when I go watch Lewis play and I see him, at 170 pounds playing in the post, and, we're playing, we were in the old Metro 7 back in those days. You old timers should remember the Metro 7, Cincinnati, Louisville, Tulane, Georgia Tech, Memphis State, which that was a pretty good league back then. Didn't get the notoriety of some of the other big time conferences, but, we're playing Louisville with Wesley Cox and Darrell Griffith and Junior Bridgman. Those are some pretty good basketball teams. And you just didn't see Louis Orr at 6'8", 175 pounds being able to play in the Metro 7 conference. Not necessarily from a skill perspective, just a physical perspective. So as much as I liked him and would have loved to have him in our program, I believe Coach Catlett was correct in making the decision. Look, let him go someplace where he's going to get an opportunity to play. And Lewis accepted it. I think his brother Lindsey was a little salty. He talked a little trash around town about us, which was fine because, as I said, the decision for us not to offer him and him to go to Syracuse turned out to be the best thing for Lewis.
Certainly did.
Dale, do you remember who recruited Lewis? Was it Rick Pitino? Wasn't it Rick Pitino, or was it Bernie?
I'm not sure because, to be honest with you, I tried to stay away from the program during the summers. I had jobs. I worked at youth camps up in the Adirondacks during the summer and that, and I tried to avoid the basketball camps and being around after having a long season. But to my knowledge, I guess Pitino had heard of Lewis when he was out in Hawaii, and he heard the situation that didn't work out for him with Cincinnati, and he brought Lewis to the attention of Coach Boeheim.
I think I heard the story about didn't Coach Pitino, didn't he get married?
Just going to say that. Yep.
He was on his honeymoon in New York or something, and Coach Boeheim got on the phone and called him. He says, "We got to get this kid from Cincinnati. Can you?" Or I don't think he said, "Can you?" He said, "Get out to Cincinnati and see this kid." And so he got on I think it was on his honeymoon. He got on a plane and went out to Cincinnati and saw him play. And then I read something about Lou wasn't too excited about getting on planes, and so Coach Pitino said he had to do everything he could to get him on the plane because he knew if he could get him to Syracuse that he thought he could recruit him. So somehow he told him he'd sit next to him, and he got him on the plane and got him to Syracuse. So I think that's how it went, or that's what I heard anyway.
So Hal, your freshman class was you, Lewis, Rosie. Was there one other player?
Yeah, there was a guy named Cliff Warwell.
Cliff, from Candor.
Yeah.
That's my neighbor down here.
Yeah. So that was it really was a great class. I mean, Rosie and Lou, even Cliff was a nice guy, but obviously Rosie and Lou were two of the nicest guys you'd ever want to meet. Lou and Rosie, kind, humble, like you said before. Just, I'm trying to think of any time over 4 years, I don't remember any of us really being sick or missing practice or having a running with the coaches, or I think we did what we were told, and we're hard workers, and I think we ended up being 118 over the 4 years.
Yeah.
I think
I
Lewis
remember
had arthroscopic surgery his sophomore year, I think it was.
Yeah, that was interesting because
He
yeah,
didn't
that
stay
was
out too long.
yeah, because nobody had heard of that before. That was kind of a new sports medicine type thing, and everybody's like, aren't you like out for the year when you have surgery on your knee? And he came back. I don't think he may have missed just one game or something like that.
Yeah, he was back within less than a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Crazy. Yeah.
So Dale, who was in your class? Who was the class ahead of those guys?
My freshman year, I had Billy Keys and Reggie Powell came in the same as I did. It was a year after they went to the Final Four. And they had Kevin King, Chris Cease,
Yep.
Burns was back, Don Degner, Ernie Siebert, Bobby Parker. Then our guards, Jimmy Williams, Ross Kendall, Larry Kelly, Larry Arrington. We had a good nucleus of guys, and thank God for my sophomore year and the great recruiting that Boeheim did. Got me out of the center spot, and we brought Roosevelt in and that, and we brought Lewis in to basically people don't realize Lewis really didn't start, but Lewis played a lot his freshman year. He used to come in for myself and Roosevelt, and sometimes with Marty Burns, and he played 3 positions his freshman year. So Coach Boeheim was good for that to move guys around a little bit and give guys opportunities then, as opposed to now. He holds freshmen back.
Yeah, he would play typically he'd have a forward sub and a guard sub. And if he was a forward sub, he had to sub in for any of those 3 spots, like you said.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think as Coach Brown said, coming to Syracuse, it turned out to be, like you said, I think it was a great opportunity for him, because not only was he playing against Rosie and Danny Shays every day in practice, he was going up against like Marty Burns, smaller, quicker, forwards, and Shaq, and who else we had? Well, Kevin James. Remember Kevin James? Quick. And so he had a mix of guarding big guys as well as the shorter, quicker forwards, and he could play against both of those types of players, and you give him a 15-foot jump shot, and he wouldn't miss it. On the elbow, he never missed from that spot. And
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, so we used to break down our, you guys probably did the same thing. You break down the guards drills, and then the forwards went with the forwards and centers, and the forwards played against the centers. And geez, we spent probably half an hour. It seemed like a half an hour every day doing that, which, I don't know if all teams do that, but that seemed to be, something we used to scrimmage all the time, like in high school and stuff like that, not breaking down individually like that. And I think, with him and Rosie developing that high-low game that they'd had, that was also huge for him.
So Dale, you probably stayed the closest to Lou over his post career, right?
Yeah, and saying that, because I left and went to Europe and South America for a while, and I had lost contact with Lewis. I was back when he was coaching at Siena.
Right.
I was down there for a few of his games and stuff, and saw him there and everything. And I didn't get a chance to see him when he was at Bowling Green or Seton Hall, unless he came up to Syracuse. And then when he was at Syracuse, I saw him a lot at the games and stuff. But throughout our years, we kept in touch, mainly through Roosevelt, because Roosevelt and Lewis always kept in touch. Rosie always told me, you can't call Lewis because he leaves his cell phone in the trunk of his car. I understood why he never got back, all the time. But, he did keep in touch every now and then. And he, when he was at Syracuse and at Siena, we were, in communication a lot, because I was at a lot of the games.
Yeah. One of the things that Raphael told me, Addison, Raph was coaching one of the high school teams. I think he was at Snyder. I think it was his high school. And he said Lewis would just say, bring your guys over. He would have them over to the Seton Hall. He'd bring them to camp. He let a lot of them go, no cost. And Raph says, like, he used to take care of his players. Raph, anything you need, come on over. He just really, really reached out a hand to Raph and to his kids and was just really there for him. It was really, truly a kind of an Syracuse alumni connection, but it was way more than that. And they didn't necessarily have, I would say, a close relationship prior, but it was just, hey, you're here, I'm here, we need to do this. And Raph, was singing his praises when we talked the other day, just about a number of these situations. And he said, and he would have me, and then he still paid me. He was like, he took my kids for nothing, and he still paid me for it. Like, he didn't have to do that. And he would, we'd go to the games, and some of it was overnight camp, and some of it was other stuff. But he really truly was such a gentleman, to everybody. And I've never heard a cross word ever spoken about Lewis, ever, by anybody.
Well, people knew Lewis. Lewis was, from a very, very, very religious family. And
Yep.
That's how he carried himself all the time. We had our fun in college and stuff, but, Lewis was the type of person that, he wanted to go to church. He, not go out and drink and, do the crazy things that, a lot of us did in college. And, that was just, the humbling part of him and the type of person that he was. And you can see that was the way he carried himself throughout his life.
So for the Syracuse guys, how did the Louis and Bowie show, the moniker, the Louis and Bowie show, how did that get its start? And talk about some of those games at Manley Fieldhouse and how tough it was as an opponent, for opponents coming in. It was like going into the Lions Den, going into that place, right?
Yeah, I think we, what was the 50, was it 51 in a row or something like that? And
Yeah.
Manley Fieldhouse was the perfect setting, on camp, kid, we could walk to the camp, walk to the gym, and pace was always packed. I think it held 9,000 or 10,000, but it seemed like 50,000. And I remember somebody asking me, hey, you think this domes thing's going to work when they first thinking about it? 30,000 people. And I'm thinking, man, it's going to seem so empty with only 9,000 or 10,000 people, not thinking there would be 30,000 people. But anyway.
Well, you guys were they were right on the court.
Oh, right on top of you. Yeah.
And it was like a football stadium. It was like a round, cylinder.
Yeah. No, it was a great place to play and great environment. And I think not only that we as players fed off of that, but I think the referees also, those 50-50 balls became 70-30 balls,
Yeah.
So that was always very helpful. But in terms of Louis and Bowie show, obviously, once they got going, the sports writers like to come up with little nicknames. And if I could have changed my name to Cooey,
You might have had a shot.
I might have had a shot. So,
that's a missed opportunity, right?
Oh,
there you
man.
go.
I was talking to my mother about changing my name. She said, nope.
You just need to make it a nickname. That's all you needed to do. Right?
No, they were twosome. And again, I just go back to that high-low business, with the high-low, but I don't even remember having, I don't know, Sonny, did you guys have any plays? I don't remember having any plays. We had a couple or something, right? We did that. We were doing the motion thing, you pass and you go run around and then
we didn't have a lot of set plays.
but it ended up going, you'd pass and run around, and all of a sudden you'd end up to the high-low with Lou and Rosie. And then again, this half an hour a day practicing high-low moves, high-low post game, and that was really unstoppable.
Yeah.
But
well, I think that when they took that picture of those two running in stride,
yeah,
and you got they both had the left foot forward and the right foot, it was just an iconic photo, and that was it.
I got it right here, Sonny. I got it right here.
Iconic. You'll never.
It's
Oh, there
right
it is. Yep.
There.
There you go.
Can you see it?
Yep.
I see it. I also see that mop of hair on you, Hal.
And there's Shaq in the back. Go ahead, Shaq. Watch it. Shaq's going, where's he going? So
Now, when you first show up, right? So there's your foursome, and there's three bigs, and there's you. You're a guard, right?
yeah.
So, what were some of the experiences that you guys had that you remember back to your time with those guys, and anything related to Louis, Bowie?
You mean in terms of on the court or off the court?
That's wide open.
Well, I'm going to go with one off the court one first.
All right.
Shaq, is it okay if I go?
Go ahead.
Did we lose Shaq?
Yeah, I think we
For a
said-
second.
Yeah.
Go
Well,
ahead.
we were freshmen, and and Louis was a quiet guy, Rosie was a quiet guy, and I was a quiet guy. We were very, I don't know if we call ourselves socially inept, but we were close. And Cliff was off in another world, but so we had this, somebody said, hey, one of these fraternity houses has steak on Monday nights, you can come and go to this fraternity house, and we said, oh, okay. We were eating whatever. And so we went every Monday night, like for 5 weeks in a row, to this fraternity house to eat steak, this is great. Thank you guys, wow. And then like on the 6th week, all of a sudden some guy stands up and says, all right, everybody upstairs or wherever we were, line up. And we're like, what? What's going on here? And Lou and Rosie and I are sitting there looking at each other. What is this? And then all these other guys, 15, 16 other guys, like, excited about doing something. So they said, okay, we got these messages, little notes, hidden around the campus, and they're going to lead you to the next note. And the first one, canister, that water tower on campus there by Thornton Park there?
Thornton Park, yeah.
That was where the first one was. So somebody had to climb up there. So everybody was all excited. Rah, and Rosie, Lou and I are looking at each other going, uh-oh, this is not going to be good. So everybody busts through the door to go, run after this first canister. And the 15 of them go left, and Rosie, Lou, and I go right back to the door. That was our last dinner we had.
Last Monday night steak.
There you go.
So that was my off the campus, off the court story. But Jack, you got any stories?
I have to apologize, guys. I got disconnected there for a second.
Yep.
We got
So
you back.
We were talking about Manley Fieldhouse and some of the stories playing in Manley Fieldhouse on and off the court with Lewis.
Well, Lewis used to always, I don't know if Hal said this earlier, but Lewis always was very nervous and little butterflies in his stomach before a game. And he'd either, have the runs or he'd have to throw up. And, it was something that, didn't matter if it was, when he was coaching or when he was playing, Lewis has always had that nervousness in him. So we were at training table one day, before a pregame meal, I should say, one day. And this is when, we've gone through the year and Lewis was having his little problems with eating and stuff. And, our trainer down low was saying, well, maybe Lewis should just have some scrambled eggs for pregame instead of, the steak and baked potato and green beans and everything like everyone else is having. So this went on for maybe 2 or 3 games. And, this is probably the first time I ever seen Lewis upset. The waitress brought the plate to him with the scrambled eggs and stuff on it, and Lewis just slammed his hand down on the counter and said, I want some meat. I'm tired of eating eggs. And we all just turned and looked at Lewis as like, wow, Lewis does have a but it was only when he was hungry. But he had the, they gave him all the protein shakes and that, and he had more friends at our dorm room to drink the protein shakes than Lewis did. He just didn't like that. They tried everything to put weight on him, and he just couldn't do it. I can't tell you some of the other stories about Lewis and I when we were roommates, but he was a great roommate to have. He always made sure that when it was time to go to practice or time to go to pregame, that he made sure that he rattled my curtain or banged on the door and said, "Shaq, let's go. We got to go. We're going to be late." So In that sense, he was a great roommate. He was a great competitor every day in practice. Didn't show any aggression other than when he was hungry. And I'm going to miss him. I'm going to miss him.
Yeah. Then, after Syracuse, now he gets drafted by the Indiana Pacers, right? Plays 2 years there and winds up with the New York Knicks, where he, becomes pretty tight with Patrick, I believe, at that point, right? Pretty good player, kind of a role player at that point, right? Did some good things with the Knicks, but they had some success when he was there, right, guys?
Oh, yes, they did. I was fortunate enough that I went to Lewis's funeral, and I heard Patrick, speak about Lewis and that. And he said when he played with the Knicks, and he used to yell at the coach. He says, "Why do you have Lewis on the bench? Get Lewis in the game. He's the only one that passes the ball to me." So he said, he goes, "I love Lewis. He passed me the ball no matter what the situation was. He'd give me the ball." And they showed a clip of Lewis with the Knicks, and I think it was against the Celtics, where he got the inbound pass, drew the length of the court, and pulled up for a jump shot, and he made it for the Knicks to win the game. And they asked Lewis about the situation and stuff, and Lewis is very humble as he is. He said, the opportunity presented itself, and with God's will, I was able to get to my spot and take my shot, and it went in, and we won the game. And that was vintage Lewis. He always gave praise to the Lord for everything that he did, and his success was because of God.
Yeah, Eton Thomas wrote a really deep, thoughtful commentary about his relationship with Lewis that was really moving.
Yes.
And he talked about Lewis telling him, or hey, let's go to getting him to church, getting him to have a kind of a spiritual aspect to his own life, and him sitting there and talking to him about you're going to have to work hard, you're going to have to work through this. And at the moment where Eton was ready to just hang it up and quit, like I'm sure each of you guys went through that with Coach B at some point in time too, and just no, you're going to stick it out. And he was there. He was sort of like his conscience. So he had a bad game, and he brought him in the gym. Like after the game, he didn't play, and he just had him making all these moves and slamming the ball, and he got out all this anger. It was like therapy, And it was really interesting to see. And he just had that low-key, very reserved approach to everything he did. I remember in communication with him over the last 6 months about, what we're doing with alumni or what's going on. And many times he didn't a lot of times respond to the group message. He would text me separately, and he'd say, "Listen, just so you know, I really appreciate you keeping me included. I love it. Thank you. I won't be able to make this, but keep sending me stuff," and et cetera, et cetera. So he always maintained a connection, but it was always on a very private level. Mm-hmm. And I always respected that.
Yeah, I remember when one of our fellow players was sick with COVID, and we were in that group chat.
Yeah.
And I've never been to church, but I was always looking forward to see what Lewis's response would be. In that, everybody would say, so and so, hang in there, do good, do this, best wishes, da da da. And then Lewis would go on, and I was like, oh, so this is what church is like, and and you read it, I'd read it, and I'm like, wow, okay, I see that, and I see that in Lou, and I was always very impressed with his devotion.
Yeah.
When I was at the funeral, they showed clips of Lewis's interviews and things, and after every interview or before every interview, Lewis would always say, "To God be the glory." He always said that before or after he spoke. And one of his players spoke that he had at Bowling Green, who was there when they made the coaching transition from the coach they had before to Lewis. And the young man had, he had hurt his knee. He was out for the year, and he was just coming back. And now new coach and Lewis is the new coach. And he was saying like, geez, what do I got to do to play? What do I got to do to play? I'm not getting any playing time. And he said he went up to Lewis and he talked to Lewis, and Lewis told him, he goes, listen, he goes, I need you to play inside around the basket. He goes, well, I'm 6'7", I'm a shooter. And Lewis says, sometimes you have to give up a position to get a possession. And he said that stuck with him, and that made him understand that, maybe, this is where I need to be, is inside around the basket instead of out here shooting jump shots if I want to be on the court to play. And he said that stuck with him for the next year or so. Lewis saying that, and he made a point of saying that he had to come to Lewis's funeral and let people know that.
Who was some of the other speakers that were there, Shaq? I know I saw a great photo of you, Patrick, and Rosie. Matter of fact, we put that on our social media as well. I mean, it was a great photo of the three of you guys. Who else spoke?
He had one of the guys that he grew up in his neighborhood with that played, basketball. He was older than Lewis. I've got the obituary program and stuff that I could grab in a second and look it up. But he also had two ministers, one from Seton Hall and one from Bowling Green, who spoke on Lewis' behalf and said, Lewis brought so many great memories and that to their church. He even brought his whole team to the church in Bowling Green. And, out of the 15 players, 7 of the players that day, committed themselves to the church. He also had the athletic director who at the time when Lewis was at Seton Hall, she was more of a, incoming secretary per se, looking, for a job and stuff. And Lewis was interviewing her, and she said she was very nervous about the interview and stuff. And, Lewis could see that she was shaking and everything. And he goes, so what do you think about, the position, the job, and what it entails and stuff? And she said that she couldn't get the words out. She was stuttering and everything. And Lewis just says, relax, honey, you got the job. And now she's the athletic director at Seton Hall.
Oh, wow.
But she came to speak on that. So he had quite a few people, that, spoke on, highly of him, and, that, basically everything that, Lewis was that we saw, he's been that way most of his life.
It's wild because I didn't know him that well. I met him a few times throughout, playing and traveling around with basketball and stuff like that. But recently, just a few months ago, actually, one of the current players on Georgetown went to my high school, a kid named Jordan Riley. And his mom was telling me how much influence Lewis had on him because he was going through it his freshman year. He had a shoulder surgery. They weren't winning. It was a real problem. And Lewis kind of talked him down off the roof, so to speak, more than once. And, they spoke very, very fondly and very highly of him and the kind of person he was, and you hear the stories too about, I guess when he was looking to get into coaching, he wound up, Pete Gillen pulled him into Xavier first, right? Mm-hmm. And then took him into Providence. Do you know how that worked out for them? How did that work out for Lou? Were you close enough with him that he would talk to you about that kind of stuff?
No, I didn't know about that because I think most of when Lewis was there, I was playing over in England at the time.
Right.
During that transition and that, so I didn't really know a lot about his experiences with Xavier and Providence.
How about Mike?
Coach Brown?
I'm sorry, Mike.
Sorry.
How about you? Did you coached against him, right? So what kind of coach was he? Was he as tenacious as he was on the floor as a player?
His demeanor as a coach, I felt, was similar to his demeanor as a person. Some coaches, your former coach, for instance, was one way when the ball got thrown up, but then, his demeanor normally was totally different from when he was coaching. From my experience, Lewis was Lewis, whether he was coaching basketball, playing basketball, or, in a restaurant having dinner after a game. I was with the late Jim Valvano once, and he was commenting on my boss, PJ Carlissimo. And I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember a commercial for the bakery products, Sara Lee. But the commercial goes, I'm paraphrasing here, everybody doesn't like something, but nobody doesn't like Sara Lee.
Right.
And Valvano paraphrased it and said, you know something about your boss? Everybody doesn't like somebody, but nobody doesn't like PJ. And that's how I feel. And that's been my experience about Lewis Orr. Everybody doesn't like somebody, but nobody doesn't like Lewis Orr. He was just that kind of person. And our paths bumped into each other all along his basketball journey and my basketball journey. When he was at Syracuse as an assistant, and I was at West Virginia, we would bump into each other. When he married his daughter that he, I don't know if inherited is the right word. What's you Syracuse guys are real brilliant. What's the what do you call this? His stepdaughter or whatever.
The daughter he raised.
Married, had a family.
Yeah.
All right, and the daughter, ironically enough, was a basketball athlete at Fordham, where I was the associate head coach.
Yeah.
So I would every now and then I'd have a knock on my door. Here's Lewis. Oh, coach, I was just over to watch my daughter play. I thought I'd stop in and say hi. Who does that? To someone who I didn't coach Lewis. I had a very, limited recruiting experience with him when he was 17 years old. 30 years later, he's stopping in my office at Fordham to just say hi. That's the kind of guy that he was. And, we would bump into each other a lot on the road. When he was at Siena, Siena was and still is in the MAC, and somehow Fordham got on the schedule. Fordham's Atlantic 10, so we're thinking, a MAC team, and our kids, more importantly, we're thinking, oh, a MAC team, we're going to go in and kick their ass. No, they kicked our ass. Lewis's teams were prepared. They played hard, just like him. So, he, like you said earlier, it's a huge loss for the basketball world because, he touched a lot of lives and he was a great ambassador and great role model and example for kids playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You just set us up, Mike, for our last thing. I appreciate the segue here. So, guys, where were you and what were your thoughts when you first heard that Lewis had passed? We're up against it. We want to get your final thoughts on Lewis, and where were you and how did you hear about his passing and what did it mean to you to be friends and to know Lewis?
I was shocked. I in September, my daughter went to Georgetown, and so she works in Georgetown in DC now, and so I was up visiting her, and I went into the new building they have on campus. The McDonough redid their gym area, and the last thing they have going out of that building is a picture of them beating us 52-50, and when they John Thompson said Manly is officially closed. So I got on the phone with Lou. I said, Lou, I'm over at McDonough. This was in September. And, we just started talking, and I said, hey, I just saw this picture here. He goes, yeah, I got to go by that every day. And, but I didn't have any hint of anything abnormal or anything like that. And then somebody, I forgot who, somebody texted me and said that he was in hospice. And, you know, I did talk to Rosie, and Rosie kind of had a similar story, that he had spoken to him about a month before that. And like Shaq said, I think Lou apparently didn't call Rosie. Rosie called Lou, and then Lou would call him back. And all of a sudden Lou was calling him, you know, called Rosie a month prior to this. So Rosie thought that was kind of unusual, but he didn't look into it any further. And so very, very sad day.
Yeah, he kept everything close to the vest. He was a very personal guy. You know, he didn't let anything out.
Yeah.
How about you, Shaq? What are your final thoughts on Lewis?
Well, I was sitting home. I was sitting home here with my girlfriend, and we were actually watching the Georgetown game. And I said, "Geez, I haven't seen Lewis on the bench at all this year. I wonder what's going on and stuff." So I called Roosevelt, and I said, "Rosie, I said, Lou's still coaching at Georgetown?" He said, "Yeah, as far as I know." I said, "I haven't seen him on the bench." So Rosie said, "Well, he's the personal assistant to Patrick Ewing now, and he doesn't travel or anything like that." And I said, "Well, I just haven't seen him." So Rosie said, "Well, let me call his wife and see what's going on and stuff." And you know, Rosie had called me back and said Lewis was in hospice, and you know, probably 2 days later, he told me that Lewis had passed away. And you know, the first thing on my mind, excuse me, guys, is that, you know, I got to be there to, you know, to see my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you know, I told my girlfriend, you know, I gotta go to Cincinnati. I gotta be there at this funeral for Lewis and for his family. And you know, I called Roosevelt and I told him that I was going. And Roosevelt said, "Well, I'm going to drive and I'll meet you there." And Rosie picked me up at the airport, and you know, we were there. We met the family, and you know, his older brothers and their family and stuff. And you know, it was a tough situation. And you know, a good friend of Lewis's in college, Lofty Spencer. You know, he hadn't seen Lewis in a long time. He was good friends with Lewis and Eddie Moss and Rosie, and you know, he showed up. So you know, we had the three of us there. You know, representing Syracuse University, and the coaches were there the night before for the viewing. You know, they didn't stay for the funeral the next day, but you know, we represented, and you know, like I said, you saw the picture of us with Patrick Ewing, and his coaching staff is there, and his son. And you know, Lewis, you know, like you said, Lewis made a great impression on a lot of people, and he's going to be greatly missed. And it's unfortunate that you know, some of the young players at Georgetown didn't get a longer experience with Lewis Orr.
Yeah, I mean, he affected a lot of people's lives, and there's something to be said for that, right, guys?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
How about you, Coach Brown?
You know, when you get to be my age, you know, you realize that you're closer to the end than you are to the beginning. And every day, you know, you see someone's obituary, and if you're fortunate, you know, you don't lose loved ones, but it's part of life. And last year, you know, I lost my sister, I lost a first cousin, you know, Lewis died, and I think the lesson, and Lewis, surprisingly, that hit me hard, because, you know, I knew this kid when he was 17, you know, I knew this kid when he was 16, and he used to, you know, come to my apartment with some of our players and eat hamburgers out on the veranda. So, you know, I didn't know that he was ill, and I would always look for him on the bench. And when I didn't see him, I wondered, like everybody else. But, you know, I've been away from college basketball for a while now, so I don't have the connections to, you know, find things out. But it hit me hard, but it taught me a lesson. And the lesson it taught me is you gotta enjoy every day because you just don't know. And I, felt terrible for Patrick and his family. But he did what God sent him here to do. He touched a lot of lives, and he was a good Christian man who ran his race, and God said, come home. So
Go
Let me
ahead.
pass this on to you, Chuck, because I remember for me, like I said, I was in touch with Lewis for a few things, mostly through text, and then I hadn't heard from him for a while. And just like, I think I remember saying something to you, like we didn't see him on the bench. I went to the Syracuse, he wasn't.
Yeah.
And people were talking about, okay, what about we doing alumni? That was the Pearl Ring of Honor and the Boeheim Ring of Honor ceremony at this Georgetown game. So I just remember having some conversations, and nobody had any information other than they really hadn't heard. And everybody's like, Lewis is a private Lewis, and there's no question he has a very deep religious, personal, person. So you don't press it, right? So I just remember reaching out, and I hadn't heard back, and then I did reach out to Rosie, I believe, and that's when I'd heard that he was in hospice, and I was that blew me away, because it wasn't, oh, he's ill, he's fighting something. I didn't even know what he was battling to the point where now he's in hospice. So then when I heard that it was that he had passed, that was a tough one, because he's, as we get older, those guys that were our heroes are closer in age to us, and it's much more impactful. And just like Coach said, I mean, enjoy every day, because that could be us, man. So
Yeah, that seems to be the lesson in the world that we live in today, guys, since this pandemic and everything, and tell the people that you love them, and give your family a hug when you see them, and live every day like it's your last, because it could be. And guys, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming out today, and
Thanks,
Sonny and I
guys.
appreciate you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank
I know sometimes it's not easy to talk about people that you're really fond of, and in that kind of way, it's a bittersweet thing. And we truly appreciate you coming out and sharing your thoughts and stories about Lewis Orr. So you've been listening to this very special edition of the Big East Rewind, as we talked about the legendary Syracuse player, and more importantly, and even a bigger legend as a person, the great Lewis Orr from Syracuse University. Thanks a lot for joining us. Have a great night.